Now that we made it back, we can see what I got. Now there's all of it together. Let's get into it one by one. I'll start with one of the most commonly used lures in the springtime, and this is a Bass Pro XPS spinnerbait, 3/8 ounce. It's got some chartreuse. Now, the reason I got this specific bait right here is because I already have a lot of white and chartreuse spinnerbaits, and whenever you can get a spinnerbait like this that's got some orange, it's got an orange Colorado blade there with a little more flair, it's going to be better in those situations where there's a little bit murkier water. This is called the Brawler blade. And spinnerbaits are easily one of the most commonly used lures in the springtime, and that's why I got it. I really like getting Bass Pro brand because I did get it at Bass Pro. It makes it cheaper. In my opinion, it's still very good quality. So the first lure is the Bass Pro XPS Brawler blade in this orange, chartreuse, and white, kind of a, it's like a classic take on the chartreuse and white with a little bit extra flair. Next up is another spinnerbait. Very similar lure, although this also has some flair, no white in it, complete chartreuse, but I absolutely love chartreuse for spinnerbaits. It's probably my favorite spinnerbait color, and this is also a Bass Pro Shops, although I got this, I don't know if you can see that, if it'll focus. I got this in the 1/2 ounce size. As you can see, it's got a big willow blade, small Colorado blade. Again, I have 2 white spinnerbaits, probably 3 or 4 white and chartreuse spinnerbaits, so I wanted something with a little more flair, especially in the springtime. It can rain a lot, it can stir up that mud and that clay, which makes the water dirtier. You needed something a little bulkier, a little flashier to get the fish's attention. That's why I went with an all chartreuse spinnerbait. And again, spinnerbaits are just one of the best lures to use in the springtime for bass. One of the most widely known and widely used. So that's another spinnerbait for my second lure. Next up is probably one of the most well-known baits for the springtime, most widely known, and this is a Bass Pro Shops XPS Rattle Shad. The most famous version of this lure is probably the Bill Lewis Rattle Trap. But in the springtime, something about this kind of red craw style color, even if there's not crawfish where you fish, or crawdads, crayfish, whatever you want to call them, the lipless crankbaits that have a rattle seem to be one of the absolute best lures you can go with. I mean, that's a great color. The hooks are very sharp, as you can tell. A test I personally like to do is I like to take the hook and scratch my fingernail, and if it makes little marks like that, then I know that they're sharp hooks. I like having it orange on bottom, black on top. I like the rattle. You can hear it pretty good here. And there's a lot of different ways to fish this. I like to provide tips and information whenever I offer these kinds of videos. So for example, this, I like to fish it. Sometimes I'll fish it through grass on a straight retrieve like this. A lot of the times I'll kind of yo-yo it, jig it up and down. That really gets them going in the springtime. And sometimes you'll just twitch it, and make it go, and then it'll fall. Sit there for a second, and then you'll reel it in. It'll go like this, and then twitch it again. Kind of like a jerkbait, but again, it's kind of a mix of a jerkbait and just a normal crankbait, because sometimes you can just let it sit and twitch it and things like that and jig it up and down. It's not as of a constant retrieve like a Squarebill or a deep diving crankbait would be, but definitely got to have a red lipless crankbait if you're going to want a good fishing lure for bass in the springtime. Next up, very similar bait, also a crankbait, again by Bass Pro. I just like it because it always seems to be $1 or $2 cheaper than, you know, Strike King or Berkeley or Rapala. Those big brands like that. At Bass Pro, their own brands seem to be more affordable, which is why I choose them every time. This is called the Crankin' 60. This is in the bluegill color, and it runs 4 feet. And this dives 4 feet, which I really like. Standard Squarebill crankbait. As you can see, a pretty standard bluegill color. I mean, it's got bluegills, orange on bottom, some striping. Just kind of looks like any standard perch or small panfish. Got a little bit of a rattle. I don't know if you can hear that. Just a slight rattle. Again, I really like that square bill on it. You just fish it shallow. I like whenever the fish get on beds they hate bluegill, so I like to fish it right outside of their bed, maybe try to draw it in. The only drawback with these, kind of like the lipless crankbait, are the treble hooks. But the Lipless Crankbait seems to do better about not getting hung up as bad as these guys do. So I would recommend this more in a rocky bottom, some riprap, maybe something that won't get snagged on. Definitely don't try it by trees or thick muck, thick grass. Definitely not going to do it there, but still, squarebills are probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite lure. I mean, spinnerbaits are probably my favorite, but this has got to be up there for my favorite lure year-round. I can fish in the spring like I'm talking about now. You can fish bigger ones, bigger squarebills in the summer, and then back in the fall, you can get back to this style of squarebill. I just love the Squarebill Crankbait, and I couldn't leave it off. Now, these two lures go together, and for these information videos, I like to provide a little bit of nuance. So this is a lure that you're not going to see on all the other fishing videos whenever you look up best bass fishing lures. You know, you're probably going to see chatterbaits on there, lizards, you know, white creature baits when they're on beds, things like that. But this is something you're not going to see very often, but I absolutely love it. Now, we'll start off with the hook I use. Again, Bass Pro Shops, it's just more affordable at the Bass Pro Shop store. That's why I prefer it. This is the Speed Shad Swimbait head. I believe this is in the Ghost Shad color, I want to say. Yes, I believe this is a Ghost Shad color for the Swimbait hook. And this is a 1/4 ounce I like. I like the 1/4 ounce because in the spring the bass aren't going to be super deep like they are in the summer when it's really hot, or in the winter. And so this gives me just enough depth, and you can see it right there, very sharp hook. And these just pair perfectly with honestly any boot tail or paddle tail swim bait, but I like this size a lot. Max Action Speed Shad. 3.3 inch I think works really well this time of year because anything smaller can tend to get some dinky bites, and anything bigger can just be too much for the bass. So I really like this size. You can see it's got some shine on the back, which I really like. Perfectly imitates a Mono. This is the Pro Blue Shiner color, and paired with this, just like that. Great pairing. I love just being able to constantly reel it in again when they're on beds, or just reeling it in anytime whenever they're coming up shallow early in the morning. I noticed that the swim bait does not get enough respect in the springtime, and it certainly deserves it. It is most certainly one of the best lures to use in the springtime, and I'm surprised that more people don't talk about it, because if you watch Major League Fishing or these big tournaments, I mean, a lot of the guys are using swim baits like this in the season. You know, I know really popular ones whenever there's really murky water are chartreuse swim baits. Those always work very well, I've noticed. But for clear to semi-clear water, I think this is going to be a really great color this spring, and I can't wait to try it out and film it all for you guys. Now, this last little kit I got doesn't necessarily pertain to the springtime, but this was $7 for 50 ribbon tail worms. They call them the squirmin' worms, as well as I believe it's 4 weights and 3 hooks. For $7, you're never going to get a better deal than that. And we've got watermelon red flake there. Great color for clear water. Now, where I am in mid-Missouri, this color works very well. Purples, reds, that's always been my favorite Texas rig. You know, ribbon tile, squirmin' worms type. That's been my favorite color. And when it rains or whenever I'm fishing a murkier pond, things like that, we got the black worm. And I'll just be up front with you guys. I've never fished a pink worm, but I've heard it's good for trout. Maybe it's just enough for a pressured pond to get a bass who's never seen a pink worm in its life to act out a little bit or to go chomp it. So maybe I'll have to do a pink worm challenge. If you want to see that, then put that down in the comments. But this was the 50-piece squirmin' worm pack from Bass Pro, $7. I couldn't say no to it. But I got all this for $42, so under 50 bucks for several good lures. Let's go over it again for the best lures for the springtime that you probably don't know about. We started it off with some spinner baits. We got the chartreuse, good for murky water, nice and bulky to get the attention of a fish. Definitely going to work. Next one is a little bit smaller of a spinner bait, but this is going to be better for ponds, dirty ponds, where you're going to need some of that flare, some of that orange to catch some fish. Then we talked about crankbaits. The Rattle Trap Lipless Crankbait, the red color in the spring, always seems to work very well. The Squarebill, Never goes wrong any time of year. A bluegill color, especially when they're on beds, they get biting mad They get fighting mad, or should I say biting mad, at bluegill during this time of year because they just love to chomp on anything bluegill. Then I talked about a lesser known lure combination, and this would be the Swimbait. This is the speed shad mixed with some speed shad Swimbait hooks, and this combination does really well any time of year. I mean, any kind of minnow swimming style bait's going to work really well, but I think that it doesn't get enough respect in the springtime, and I'm definitely excited to use it. And then we closed it out with this Squirm & Worm kit. Doesn't necessarily pertain to the spring, but I'm sure you'll catch fish on it, although these might have better results, but I couldn't pass this up for $7. Well, that does it for this video. Stay tuned for the next one, and make sure that you look out for some spring fishing videos.